Good morning, everyone. Welcome to everyone joining. It's always nice to see everyone. I think if you see a smiley face, it feels warmer immediately. If you are in a place where you are cold, I just want to say to everyone, I love you so much. I took off my jacket, need just to look pretty. So the love is there, definitely. Welcome to everyone in the chat. Please tell us where you're from. It's always nice to see some faces. It's nice to see some regular faces. There's an upcoming birthday. Miriam Khan, I think it's your birthday as well on Friday. Please enjoy it lots. And eat extra cake. Now, remember, you can't put on weight if it's your birthday and you eat cake. So that's one of the benefits as well. This is where you learn stuff, ne? Nobody knew that about cake. Please say hello to everyone. Tell us where you're from. We are having such an amazing session this morning. Of course, if you're just joining, we are recording the session. If you're not happy about being recorded, please leave the room. We will put the session up on YouTube this afternoon. I know a lot of people always can't attend. So please go look at our YouTube channel. Also, it's got some history on there as well. So we share knowledge, we're having fun. It's going to be an hour. And on this, I almost want to call it power hour because I have an absolute power player here today. And I had the privilege of working with her even before she changed her name. Hey, how privilege is that? So we have Ansuet Marks here from VDM Attorneys this morning. They are on our panel. We actually work with Ansuet almost 5 years already. So she's been doing lots and lots of evictions for Expello. So she's not a new name to me or my team. But Ansuet, welcome. And please tell us, you're one of the directors of VDM, but it's also quite a new firm. So please give us a bit of a
Yes.
history.
Thank you, Elise. Thank you very much for your time and thank you for hosting me today. I do appreciate it. Yes, like Elise said, I've worked with Expello now for about 5 years. I've been in litigation my entire career. It's all that I know. It's all that I want to do. It's all that I can do. Did my articles in litigation, took my niche up in property law and contractual law and high court commercial litigation. And yeah, I was privileged enough to start a litigation department and was headed the litigation department for 5 years until my partners and I then decided to make the jump. So with me, my partners in the firm is Cor van Deventer. Cor is a big name in the property industry and the conveyancing industry coming from PE, from Gryvenstein and his days there, moved over to Joburg, and yeah, he is a phenomenal person, a phenomenal attorney. So we started together because we worked together at our previous firm, and we decided, well, it's going to be Van Deventer, Doulaf, and Marks. We have two other directors, Subhash Doulaf, who is a lot in Eskom, municipalities, public sector works and public sector litigation and advisory. And then our fourth director is Jolene Wasserman, which, if you're a property practitioner, I think you know the name. She was the head of the PPRA for quite some time, and then we convinced her to join as well. So we are the ultimate one-stop shop from bond originating, where we are partnered with Phoenix Bonds, up until if the transfer goes through, if the transfer goes south, that's me and that's my department. Jolene is there for you. We have the utmost expertise to assist you on whichever front. So yes, new firm. We bought into an old firm actually, and we then decided to change the name, which we are allowed to do at the end of April. So the firm itself, VDM, is actually a month old, but we are bringing around 35 years plus experience into the firm. So fantastic to be here. And one of the most exciting things were to contact Expello again and say, okay, well, we want to be on your team and we want to be on your panels because we work with Elise and Johan and everybody in Armand on various occasions. So yeah, thank you for having me, and it's lovely to see quite a few familiar faces into the room as well.
Oh, thank you, Ansuet. So first I want to say you guys are doing a fantastic job. I see your marketing is everywhere, and I think everybody's going to get used to your fantastic branding and colors and name very, very quickly. So let's jump into the fun stuff. So, I said to you, when I spoke to you, I said, I know a lot about evictions. I can evict people. That's our ball game. But sectional title, that's like a whole different type of thing that's happening, and it's coming up more and more. And as we're going to discuss, I'm also going to tell you the run-ins that we had with the body corporates. So we're going to touch on a bit about body corporate rules, and please, this is not sectional title questions. I mean, that's what we're going to do on it. The aim is today to really see how that link in with lease agreements. You as a property practitioner from managing a rental, the letter of demand, evictions, and then just some general advice, and that's what we're going to do, talk about today. So let's really jump into it so immediately. Now, Ansela, I have to be honest. This was one of the thorns by my side the one time. And this is when I firstly realized, because I'm fortunate to stay on a farm, so there's no body corporates or even neighbors. I don't even have a neighbor. This is when we realized we had an incident where we were struggling with the tenant to vacate. And after we used all our charms, we finally were ready to get into the truck and to go. I mean, that was our happiest hour. And then when you got to the gate, the security guard said, "Nah, where's the form?" And I said, "What form now? Well, what's it now? No, he's not going to let this guy out." And all I'm thinking is, now, if he doesn't go out, I need to pay a lawyer. So let's start by the question. Can a body corporate, and I say body corporate, and I know it's the trustee or the managing agent, but for convenience, the entity, can they prevent a tenant from entering or exit without this required form?
Yeah. So Elisa, just to take you a little bit back, when we started our relationship 5 years ago, I was quite intimidated to know the client on the other side is an attorney. But I am very glad to hear that you also get those measures where you're like, well, why is the form necessary? And I'm actually going to fight it, even though the form may be necessary. So from my side, yes, I'm purely in litigation. I like the fight. I like the thrill of the kill. But at the end of the day, I sat quite a lot, in extensive consultations with Jolene Wasserman as well, who's an absolute, sectional title specialist. That's her niche as well. And this has come up quite a few times, this question. So what Jolene has always advised, and what we usually advise the clients, is the form that you're referring to, the entry form. I'm not talking about an inspection form to the property. I'm talking about an entry form to the body corporate, to the complex, and the exit form. That is included in the rules for the sake of convenience and to avoid any nuisance. So, for example, it's to declare that the tenant isn't allowed to move in between 12 or 11 o'clock at night and 7 o'clock in the morning, because if you're going to come in with a 5-ton truck to move at 3 o'clock in the morning and everybody's dogs start barking and you wake up the entire neighborhood and the entire complex, obviously there is some disturbances that may occur. So the fact that the purpose of those forms are mainly to avoid nuisances, noise, stuff, disturbances, general disturbances. However, the body corporate is not allowed to prevent you from moving without the required form. So as long as you keep to the rules, all the tenants must always be aware of all the rules and the body corporate rules. You can be liable for a fine if you do breach the rules. For example, now you decide you want to move 2 o'clock in the morning. However, if you are going to move between the hours that you're actually allowed to move and you don't have the form, the body corporate can't actually stand on their heads and shout and say, "Okay, well, you're not allowed to move." It remains your right to move whenever you need to and can move. However, the body corporate can't really maintain or keep you there or try to avoid you from moving without the form. The form is merely a disturbance avoidance measure.
So I'm saying, and luckily you know me, I'm a stickler for rules, yes. And we problem solvers. So ideally, I absolutely agree. I think this is where an agent plays a key role. The agent must know when they lease out a property, they must know about these forms and they must have it ready. So I almost want to say, every Expeller client, if you know about these forms, please tell my team as well, that we can sort of pre-complete it and we just need to dot the date down. So because at that stage, because when we get involved, it's very unique circumstances. But I think in the standard, you have to do that. Because then the second thing sort of came up, and it was, what if, the tenant now wants to leave and the agent clearly didn't complete the forms? And I mean the standard things, or now there's a delay or there's losses. Can an agent be held liable, or is it even the obligation of the agent?
Unfortunately, and I mean, Elise, I've been assisting agents now, property practitioners, for quite a while. Unfortunately, you're looking at possible negligence. If the agent didn't attach the rules to the lease agreement or didn't ensure that the tenant knows, because I mean, if that tenant stands in front of a boom gate and was never made aware of an entry or an exit form, and it was on the agent to notify them because you, as the agent, you gave your undertaking to your owner and the person that gave you the mandate, you gave that undertaking that you will ensure that everything moves, smoothly. Now, I mean, I'm in litigation. I know things go south. Okay. That's where I get my bread and butter from. However, at the end of the day, you as the agent, that is your undertaking to your client to say that I will make sure the tenant knows exactly what they need to do, cannot do, etc. From losses, it's a very difficult thing to attach a quantum to something like that. For like this, for example, if a tenant now stands in a boom gate, and while everybody is now fighting because the agent didn't, say or didn't advise on the entry form or the exit form or something like that, and now there's maybe a delay in the process or there's frustration caused. I think your big issue here and the big concern is a possible negligence claim or a complaint at the PPRA. I've held this and I've had this before where I did sort out PPRA complaints. I know Jolene has mentioned this as well. And I think that's a big thing. You as the agent, you've mentioned it as well. Attach the rules to the lease agreement. Make sure that they have the rules before they move in. Make sure that they understand the rules. It's actually scary how people don't like to read. Not everybody likes to read, and not everybody reads the stuff. They get the rules and they go their merry way. Make sure, check in, make sure if you know that the lease is going to lapse, for example, and the termination date is close, and you know that they're not going to renew the lease, make sure that they know what section to read when it comes to the termination and the exit and all of that. I don't think, to be very frank with you, I don't think it's a financial loss that you can quantify, to say, okay, well, what is the exact loss here that you can attach to the agent? But you are looking at a possible PPRA complaint, and we all know that PPRA can also impose fines if they do find you negligent. So that's the financial aspect where it may, render you or actually concern you as well. So just make sure your tenants attach the rules, make sure they or have the rules, make sure you attach it to the lease agreements, and keep your side clean. I always tell people I need the proof in any litigation or any litigious proceeding. Make sure you don't give your rules, just hand it into the tenant. You need to email it. You need to have proof that you gave them that rules and told them it as well.
So, and I said you say it so nicely, and I think the biggest fear we also have is social media. Eh? I think these days, if anybody does anything wrong, they go and complain on social media saying this agent was so incompetent, and what. And so if we can never stop it totally, but do as valuable advice. Just make sure you have everything on place. I'm actually seeing that Sean Late is online as well. I want to throw in and say, Sean, I think on your checklist, please make sure that you have a block that says, did you complete the incoming and outgoing form? So I think that's going to be ideal in your checklist, that you actually have that block, because people can forget. I know how crazy things can go at the end of the month. Just quickly, Raneen, you asking, it's always great to hear from you as well. There's entry and exit forms is not a legislation thing. It's not a standard thing. I see just more and more complexes, especially more upper class or where there's a lot of people. This is becoming a norm. So if you're not working with a complex that doesn't have it, I almost want to say don't go add it, ne? Don't go remind them and give them advice.
No.
If you would like it. And then I'm just going to quickly see, Miriam was saying, we have tenants who don't notify when they are leaving. They want to run away without paying the rent. Get a call from the security at the gate asking for moving forms. Miriam, that's almost like the unicorn situation, where you have that type of problem. And I think you almost have to, that's when you speak to the security, because for me, it's always a difficult one. On the one hand, you want to say to the tenant, well, while you're at the gate, someone make a payment, they will open the boom and you can go. But we know they most probably don't have the money, and at least they are gone, because then you don't have to evict them, which is going to be more costly. But that is a predicament. Any advice from your side on that, Ansuet?
I'd just like to thank you for the question. Thank you for that question. It's a very good question, because I have seen this. Unfortunately, especially when we look at the courts and when we look at the law always says that, is there any alternative relief for you? Is there anything else you can do? Now, if you're sitting with tenants who didn't pay and they're sitting at the boom gate, security can't stop them. You're not allowed to stop them. If they move, they're going to move. Because, and the law is very clear that you will have a recourse to follow up for that payment that is in an arrear. So you can then sue them. And I agree 100% with Elise. Get them out. I'm very pro for an eviction, and I think that's why we work so well together, because we always chase with an eviction. You can always chase for money afterwards, but the longer a tenant is not paying and they're staying in a property, the longer the damage is there for the owner and for your client as well. But at the end of the day, even if they stand at the boom gate, you're not allowed to prevent them from moving. And the law, and I promise you a court, because I've had this before, the court is going to tell you, okay, well, you can chase them afterwards. They're going to move wherever, and you can institute summons and you can proceed from a legal recourse. You can definitely get some relief in a court for that as well. My advice will always be, rather than having them and keeping them there, and then now they're not paying their rent, which is just causing stress and causing financial burdens onto the owner. Let them move out and chase for the recourse afterwards. I promise you, we have traces, we have trackers, we find these people and we chase them up for those payments as well.
Yeah, and just on the last thing on this point, and as Nolan says, remember, these people, the reason why these rules are coming into place is because it's a mission managing so many different people. So we need to have rules in it's convenience, as Ansoet said as well. So I'm not saying it's bad, and I think it's sometimes it can be inconvenient, but in the bigger picture, because think about it, how would you feel if you're sleeping and yet at 12 o'clock a big truck comes and it's bumping and it's a noise, né? You don't want that. So I think that is where it sort of makes sense.
Yes.
But now, also, Ansoet, from my side, is it feels to me body corporates feel that they are very powerful. And I had actually on a couple of occasions where I get letters where they say they are going to evict the tenant because the tenant is contravening the body corporate rules. And I have to say, sometimes some of those complaints are very, it's not really tested. You know, it's because somebody doesn't like something, now suddenly you're noisy, and it actually has to be tested. It should actually go on trial, some of those complaints.
But just let it see what happens.
but it just in-house. But now, can a body corporate evict a tenant?
No. So if you look at, I'm speaking now from a contractual point of view, the contract and the agreement is between owner in the complex and the body corporate, and the other contract is between tenant and owner. So you can't jump over and above each other's heads here. It's either going to be if there's a problem in one of the units that's being leased out or that's being rented out, the body corporate will have to speak to the owner, and the owner will have to rectify that and tell the tenant and get the tenant in line. But you can't have that where the body corporate tries to go over the owner's head. It remains the owner's property. Yes, the body corporate has a lot of rules and a lot of stuff that everybody must keep to, but at the end of the day, that tenant, that problematic tenant, that is the responsibility of the owner. I also think, Elise, because I mean, I'm working with a lot of body corporates here, and I'm working with a ton of trustees where I do a ton of whether or not it's interdicts or noise disturbances or a dog that's a problematic dog or something like that. And trustees have a lot of work. That's why there's managing agents as well, you know. I don't think trustees need to get involved into stuff like that, whereas it's not their environment with regards to evicting tenants and addressing problems with tenants. Address the problem of the owner. That's the owner's responsibility to sort out if their tenant doesn't comply with any of the rules in the body corporate, because you're having this agreement where once the owner buys into a complex, that owner undertakes to say, I understand the rules, I understand what I'm buying into, and I will adhere to it. So whoever the owner places in that property, the owner must make sure that the tenant then adheres to it. And if not, and there's a breach, then in effect, there's a breach of the lease agreement. And I think we're going to speak about this probably a little bit later. Then you can breach them, cancel, etc.
Okay. And just before we get to that breach, Michelle, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, ask a very good question. Can a body corporate block tenants' biometrics if the landlord has not paid their levies? Because is that not almost like evicting them, or it's spoliation moves now, isn't it?
That's a mandament van spoelie. That's exactly. It's a weird name. I've never understood why people called it a mandament van spoelie, but it's a mandament van spoelie. No, that's a spoliation application waiting to happen. So what you need to understand is we're dealing here with constitutional rights. And whenever this is why body corporates and sectional titles and your proceedings must be 100% correct. Your documents must be 100% correct whenever you're dealing with sectional titles and body corporates and HOAs and trustees, because at the end of the day, you're dealing here with a roof over people's heads, all right? Mm-hmm. And you cannot take that as a constitutional right. It's a constitutional right for people to actually have a roof over their head, to have electricity, to have water. And the moment you take that right away from someone, you're open for a spoliation application. So if that body corporate changes the biometrics, I've had this, the Zalze estate last year, I did a big spoliation application because the body corporates changed the owners. The owner was actually staying on the property and they changed his biometrics. Urgent spoliation application waiting for you to happen because you're not allowed to spoliate that access from someone. You're not allowed to take it away from a person. So no, the moment you change someone's or you take access away out of the property, open for a spoliation application against the trustees, and it will be the tenant. It will be the tenant because it's their constitutional right that's being infringed on. The tenant will have to bring the spoliation application against the body corporates. I must tell you, you're sitting with a hell of a cost order there as well. So if you get costs, it will most likely be on a punitive scale. Don't change or don't take away the access to a property from anybody.
So, you're bringing something up very, very valuable, and I'm seeing. Sorry, I'm checking the chats as well.
No, I'm also seeing it coming through, but it's fine. We'll get to everything. We're seeing all the chats and the messages coming through.
But Sean is asking a very good question, and I think this is always the convenient way, is that instead of a tenant going and fighting with the body corporate, they immediately threaten the landlord. So Sean's question is, if an owner to inform the body corporate that they have maybe how Sean, not sure if this is correct, but I have advised owners to inform the body corporate that they may be held responsible for any losses, damages suffered because of the body corporate's incorrect action. So firstly, I think the trustees will be held liable if whether it's the managing agent or anything to that effect that acts. But what should a landlord do if the tenant now gets the body corporate goes and change the biometrics? They can't go in, and now the tenant actually holds the landlord liable because technically the tenant doesn't have any relationship with the body corporate, isn't it?
So at the end of the day, you're looking at a very gray area, Elise. I've also dealt with this before previously, where obviously there's a lease agreement that now regulates the relationship between the tenant and the landlord. Now everybody is asking, okay, well, if the body corporate infringes on that lease agreement, we need to be and I'm very realistic when I consult with clients. I don't see myself as a sugarcoating attorney. I'll tell you whether or not you have merits, and I'll tell you whether or not you have a claim against anybody. I will never advise a client or I will never advise the tenant that's now being spoliated and whatever. I'll never advise that tenant to go after the landlord. It's also not the landlord's fault, but if the biometrics were changed. However, it's a very gray area because if the landlord, for example, didn't pay the levies, and that's why the body corporate is attack or basically infringing on the lease agreement. In the lease agreement, the landlord would have made the undertaking and agreed to certain responsibilities, meaning, the undisturbed habitation and the undisturbed occupancy of the property, etc. So, in effect, if the landlord does not pay the levies, and that then circulates and creates a situation where the occupancy of the tenant is disturbed, it can have a sense of, okay, well, you've breached a lease agreement because in effect, that's what's happened now. The landlord couldn't come to the table with the responsibilities that they undertook. However, if a tenant is sitting in front of me saying that the body corporate did X because the landlord didn't pay, the levies, I will always advise the tenant, well, in order for me to get you that urgent relief and that urgent spoliation application, you as the tenant, we're going to go against the body corporate and we're going to seek the cost from the body corporate. Because at the end of the day, as much as it's the owner's fault because they haven't paid the levies, it wasn't the owner that took away the access. You always need to go against the defaulting party or the party that's actually creating the breach. And in this case, then it is the body corporate. So yes, the body corporate can be held liable for incorrect actions like Sean has mentioned. And also it's a merit assessment. We go from a case-to-case basis. And a part of that merit assessment is to say, okay, who created the breach, who created the disturbance, and why did they create it? Body corporates, definitely. If there's incorrect actions, the body corporate or the trustees of the body corporate, actually, but we understand what we're talking about, the trustees can, of course, be held liable. But when it comes to the landlord not paying levies, that's between, again, the relationship body corporate and landlord. And if the trustees then jump over the landlord's head in order to attack or go against the tenant, where it's not the tenant's fault, that is again a relationship that's being constructed between tenant and body corporate that needs to be addressed, not really tenant and landlord. The body corporate has a responsibility to go against the landlord for their outstanding levies, not against the tenant, and deprive the tenant from access. It's a big no-no in the law.
And just to add, you said it so nicely. The wording was, if the body corporate just goes and change the biometrics. If the landlord instructs the body corporate to stop the biometrics and attempt to make the tenant's life miserable, then the landlord is the fault. You can't do that.
So I'm going to use a very simple example because I think this is, it's a big problem that we're currently having is cutting electricity and cutting water.
Yes.
So you have two situations, and it's exactly the same because you are being deprived from your constitutional right regarding water, electricity, or access to a property. So to give you an example, I've sat at the instructions of, for example, my clients who didn't pay water and electricity. They are the owners, and the municipality came and the landlord didn't pay water and electricity, but it's being leased out. So the municipality came and just cut off because the electricity said, well, I'm running over 100K in debt here. I'm going to cut you off. So the municipality did it out of their own front. What usually happens in that case, if the landlord did not give the instruction, the same as with the biometrics, you will bring a spoliation application and your first respondent will be the trustees. You will still cite your landlord as the second respondent, but in your pleadings to the court, you're not asking for relief against the landlord because the landlord didn't give the instruction. In the case where that landlord gave the instruction, we're again citing him or her as the second respondent, but then we're going to ask for relief. So if we can prove it, but that's always the thing. How do you prove that this landlord gave the instruction if you're not aware about it? Yes, the body corporate can come and say, okay, well, the trustees can come and say, well, the owner told us to change your biometrics. If you don't have really proof, it's a very, very, very volatile area and a very dangerous area to run with pleadings against someone if you don't have the proof. So your trustees, if your trustees change the biometric, you will always go against them first. And depending on whatever happens, you will always cite your landlord. If the landlord gave the instruction, we want relief against the landlord as well, meaning we want legal costs against the landlord as well. And we want some type of punitive measure against the landlord. If we are not aware of any instruction given by the landlord, we'll still cite them because they are an interested party, but we won't ask any relief against them.
Great, fantastic. So while we're on the body corporate rules, there's amazing questions coming through here. So I'm going to go from Miriam's one as well. The body corporate found that the apartment was being used as an Airbnb, which is not allowed in the estate. I know this is also a very big thing in Cape Town. So they denied access to the owner. Is this legal?
You can never deny access. You're opening for a spoliation. We're moving to what other reliefs are there. The courts are very, very strict in this. And I mean, we litigate in Joburg, and I think Johannesburg is one of the most volatile courts and litigation fields that you have there because people don't really take nonsense in the litigation fields in Johannesburg. So you're looking at what else can be done. And to deny access is not your relief that you want here. You cannot deprive access to an owner. You cannot cut electricity and water in certain circumstances without that disconnection orders and everything that's going around. So from our side, no, you cannot dismiss access or not grant access to the owner. There are other reliefs. For example, to place them on terms, to actually sue them, to bring an application to try and get a court order to force the owner not to use it as an Airbnb, which is obviously an interdict. So we're looking at an interdict application here to force the owner not to use it as an Airbnb. That is, in this case, I would say that is going to be your most, accurate relief form in the courts, is to actually go for an interdict. But it's not to take away access. You can never take away access because of that spoliation application and the constitutional rights. So no, that's not legal. What the trustees should have done or ought to have done or whatnot is to obviously chase for an interdict.
Okay. And I'm surprised. I'm reading Kim's question here. She says, I have a tenant with who has stayed in the estate for 1 year. The lease has come up for renewal, and the landlord doesn't want to renew the lease, but agreed to give the tenant 2 additional months. The estate advised that the renewal period or the lease period cannot be less than 6 months. Since this is a special instance of simple renewing for 2 extra months, can the estate enforce this rule or ask for a minimum period of 6 months? Yeah, can a body corporate be that authority? Is this happening?
No. So what we need to understand is, and I'm just going to add this little asterisk disclosure there. No proper attorney is going to give you advice on prima facie facts being given. I always say I need to read the documents. So in this case, I'd like to see the rules and I like to see the lease agreement, because no proper attorney is just going to say, oh no, whim, this is the thing. However, on prima facie facts that I'm seeing now and on first view, no, because at the end of the day, ownership rights in South Africa, we all know what's going on. We all know that, there's always these threats being made in the economic climates and everything. Ownership rights stand extremely strong. You can actually do with your property what you want. And I'm not now talking about your illegal extensions and conversions and stuff like that. I mean, there are stuff that the body corporate rules are actually very fair in asking, and very fair in asking of any of the owners. However, when it comes to this, you always look at your interest. You look at your direct interest and your financial interest. And if that 6 months is going to hurt the owner in a financial interest way, there is a big possibility that you'll be able to oversway the actual rules of the body corporate. Now, again, disclosure, I need to see the rules. However, if we look at a financial impact to say, well, if you're going to have to grant a minimum of 6 months, that's going to mean that the tenant is then going to leave and I'm not going to find another tenant. So for 6 months, I may not actually have a tenant in my property and I'm going to lose out on that. Whereas opposed to if we can enter into the negotiation to say, listen, give the 2 months and then I can, in that 2 months, look for another tenant, which obviously, because what we're looking at here is, for example, now, let's say the renewal period is coming on immediately. Now the body corporate says, 6 months. Now that tenant says, I'm not going to do 6 months. Now I'm moving out. Immediately, there's a financial impact for the owner, especially if they don't find a tenant. There's a lot to consider when we do this merits assessment. We look to see where's the property situated? What is the possibility of obtaining a new owner? What was a new tenant, sorry. We look at a lot of the factors. So yes, I would say that you can overswear the rule if you see that, and if you can show that the financial prejudice of the rule to the owner is more than to the benefit of the body corporate. We need to understand that everything works on a scale. I'm not talking about the cliche scales of justice. We need to measure everything on what is the financial prejudice to the owner and what is the benefit to the body corporate to maintain that 6-month rule. I would say if whichever one weighs heavier, that will be the one that's going to be the determining factor in a court of law. So I would say, obviously, I am a certified mediator as well. We do a lot of mediations. Go into your discussions to see if the rule can't be overruled. Sorry for the pun. See if the rule can't be moved around and maybe negotiate then on the 2-month basis as opposed to the 6, if you look at financial prejudice. But no, body corporates and trustees, you said it at the beginning, Elise, there's quite a lot of people who think, we're very mighty now and this is giving us all the power of the power in the world. However, the authority is also to be limited. You cannot tell another person what they're going to do with their property. And like I said, not speaking about illegal extensions and conversions and stuff, but just for the use of it, you as the owner, you have your property rights that's envisioned in the Constitution as well, especially in the Sexual Title Management Act. So I would say there that we have the discussions. We tell the body corporate and the trustees, listen, this is what we're dealing with from a financial prejudice point of view. If that financial prejudice weighs heavier than the benefit to the body corporate, I would say move the rule and try to avoid possible litigation against the body corporate on that side as well.
Thank you, Antoinette. And there's one thing that sort of pops up in my mind, and I haven't discussed this with you, but isn't there, because quite clearly it seems, can a body corporate require that you actually file your lease agreement with them? I mean, isn't there something in terms of POPI to say, what about privilege, that you are forced to actually share all of this? But that is just what's popped up in my mind, because I mean, if they know exactly when a lease is expiring, it tells me that they know, because technically you must just tell them, no, it's just continue on a month-to-month basis. Do you think that, I'm going to touch on some of the questions, but my question I think is relevant, but I want to hold it for a next session, because I do think that's going to be an interesting thing. Then Tabi Singh said, can a body corporate open a case against a tenant who damaged the property of the complex? Sure. This happened when the tenant physically attacked the security guard. She damaged the windows of the guardhouse and electricity fence. The security guard opened a case against the tenant. I want to say yes.
Crazy stuff, eh? Crazy stuff that we're dealing with. So I always, whenever I move into the property law, I see who's my players in the field. I see my tenant, I see my landlord, and I see my body corporate. 100% agreed that the security guard had to open, because now we're sitting with a security guard who's another player. 100% agree that the security guard had to open a case against the tenant, because that's a relationship that formed immediately once that tenant engaged with the security guards and it became a physical altercation. That immediately set grounds there for the security guards to take action against the tenant, because the security guards were harmed in whichever way by the tenant's action. So there's definitely merit for that, security guards against tenant. When it comes to the actual physical, I'm speaking about financial losses, and this is what I'm financial damages. What I've seen from previous experiences of previous cases is use that, and this is why it's a daunting task to put in the correct person to take over a lease in your property. Please speak to Expello. I push lease and Expello forward in everything, because they do vet and they do see, who the tenants are and what we're dealing with and all of that. Because unfortunately, you as the landlord, like I said before, you enter that complex and you're telling the body corporates, I will adhere to your rules. I will adhere to the regulations within the complex, etc. The moment you put someone in your property, you are, in Afrikaans we say, jy staan pa. You are standing in a stance of responsibility for that person that you're putting in there. So when it comes to financial damages and losses, it's very rare that the body corporate is again going to jump over the tenants, the landlord's head. The body corporate is going to tell the landlord, listen, this is the person you put in here, Unit 97, this is your responsibility. And the landlord will then have the recourse against the tenant to say, okay, well, I now have to pay for damages and financial losses that I didn't occur because you did it to me. So it's again not jumping over the landlord's head. The body corporate trustees are going to tell the landlord, listen, this is a fine here. This is a financial damage or loss that we suffered. We want you to pay it. And then again, we're looking at the relationship between landlord and tenant, where the landlord is going to say, okay, well, tenant, you caused this to me. This is my damage that I suffered because of your actions. And now I want to claim it back from you guys. So everything basically works in a chain reaction where it's trustee to landlord, landlord to tenant in certain circumstances. And I'm speaking now again, blood on the walls here, where if it's a tenant, running around at 2:00 in the morning and causing havoc and, throwing rocks through windows. I know it sounds bad, but this is actually something that I've dealt with before, screaming and shouting at each other. Yes, in an immediate case, the trustees can then take immediate action to either phone the police or get the criminal case involved and stuff like that. But when it comes to financial damages for property and stuff like that, that's going to be the landlord. Again, if you look at the scales, you're going to always have to see what weighed a little bit heavier. Was it the protection that the complex or that the trustees wanted to give to the complex, or was it an infringement of the tenant's rights? And in this case, if you're having a tenant that's creating havoc Obviously, you'll have to look at the trustees who then will jump to make sure that the complex is not disturbed. But when it comes to financial damages and stuff like that, anything that actually doesn't need to be addressed at that stage because it's a financial damages claim, that will go against the landlord, because the landlord is taking responsibility for that tenant, which they will then take a recourse against the tenant for in due course.
Yeah, so it's quite scary if you think what crazy stuff does happen in complexes. There's quite a couple of questions that's coming through, and I almost want to say that all of them actually have been answered. And I think just to summarize is the relationship is always the body corporate has a relationship with the owner has a relationship with the tenant. So if the body corporate goes and cut the electricity because the tenant didn't pay, the landlord didn't pay his levies or whatever, the tenant will have to hold the landlord liable. And the landlord, that's the chain. You can't skip it. Same thing. A body corporate can't go put pressure on the tenant because the landlord didn't pay the levies. That's not how the relationship work. That's not relevant parties. They must speak to the right people. And I think that is one of the things that is important. Always go, what is the chain? So if the body corporate is doing something, this is actually with a body corporate owner relationship. It's not where the criminal aspect, like physical assault, yes, that's a personal thing. Like Ansel said, that that security guard was assaulted. I mean, that's a case that he can open. He's not going to open against the landlord. The landlord didn't assault it, but the financial chain. So all of that. And no, they can't just go and cut electricity. They need a court order. They can't take the law into their own hands. I see we're getting a different. What if it's electricity? What if it's a biomass? All of them is the same thing. You can't take the law into your own hands. So I want to go over to the next one. And I think this is, which we often see, is can one issue a letter of demand solely on the basis that the tenant does not adhere to the body corporate rules?
Yes. So at least you can issue a letter of demand. You must issue a notice. It's technically for me a notice of breach because you're breaching the. So I think a lot of people, whether or not you call it a letter of demand, notice of breach, same old, potato. But at the end of the day, you must place them on terms to say that you are contravening, whichever body corporate rule. I can tell you one thing, and this is what I mentioned. The moment you go into sectional titles, like I said, your process must be 1000% correct. Your pleadings must be 1000% correct because you are dealing with the constitutional rights here. The moment you have anything that tenant or that landlord can, question or attack in a court of law, they're going to attack it, and you're going to stand with an egg on your face in front of a judge or a magistrate. So yes, you must issue a notice of breach / letter of demand when someone is contravening the body corporate rules, and you must give them the opportunity to rectify said breach. Meaning, if they're breaching, for example, a noise disturbance complaint came up, you must give them the opportunity to then say, okay, well, don't do it again, or we're going to come with an interdict, etc., etc. So definitely notice of breach, but you just need to format it in the perfect wording if that person doesn't rectify the breach, so that you can take the matter further.
So I'd say this is always the question I get. So you now send them a letter of breach saying you have contravened the noise clause. Please don't make noise in the next 20 days. And then a week thereafter, they have a big party and they contravene this rule. When do you cancel? Do you cancel then after the noise, or do you wait the 20 days?
No, so you cancel if the breach happens again. So it's going to depend on, you don't need to wait the 20 days and then go to the court and say, okay, well, I waited the 20 days, but the breach has occurred 7 times in the meantime. If you have placed them on a breach period to say, you are not allowed to do X, Y, and Z, and they do X, Y, and Z, the moment they do it, you're open for a cancellation. Let's just clarify here. It's not the trustees of the body corporate that's going to cancel the lease. It's going to have to be the landlord, because if a notice of breach is sent to the tenant, the landlord is always cited in as an interested party. And the moment everybody is going to go and raise, red flags towards the landlord to say, listen, your tenant is doing X, Y, and Z, that tenant, obviously there's again lease agreements, and you need to make sure your lease agreement is on par with everything that the current legislation says. It must be 100% correct in wording. But again, your tenant would have taken on responsibilities to say, as the tenant, I undertake to do X, Y, and Z. I will adhere to the body corporate rules. And. So, in effect, the landlord, if the landlord gets a complaint from the trustee saying, listen, your tenant is doing X, Y, and Z, landlord can issue the notice of breach. And again, if that notice of breach in terms of the lease agreement is issued and the person again doesn't either rectify the breach or the breach reoccurs, the landlord can then cancel the agreement. You don't need to wait for your 20 days or your breach period. If the breach happens again, you're open for cancellation immediately.
Okay. And just one of the things, because, I know a lot of systems, they've got these letter of demands, notice of breach, but it's all focused on money. And I have to say, I think, as you said so correctly, your letter of demand regarding a breach for a body corporate rule, it has to be worded correctly, because that's going to be the foundation. If it's flimsy, and you need to cancel and evict, you're going to have a problem, because you can cancel and evict just purely because they're not keeping to the body corporate rules. I mean, it's as serious.
Yes.
And this is almost where I want to say to everybody online, because it's such a unique letter of demand, it does help to reach out to our panel attorneys. I'm going to share Antoette's details as well. I'm saying this with love, because I know they will always help where they can, but please, this is not going to be a free line that they're going to dish out letter of demands. Okay. There is going to be a fee involved. As an Expella member, you do get preferred rights. But I do think if it's such a headache, very often what we see is they contravene the body corporate rules and they don't pay. Then it's much easier just to cancel on the non-payment, because that's cleaner and you don't have to now go prove, yes, I did make a noise. Oh, actually, no, they're just loud people. It makes it easier. So there is a lot of things that involved in that. So one can cancel, and, Ante said it so nicely. It must be clear that you should not do this for the next 20 days. And if they do, then immediately go, well, you did it again. Like Shaggy says, very, very insightful. Let's quickly go through some of the questions. And again, guys, I'm so excited about this, because clearly, everybody thought sectional title is like separate. Levy collections and no things. And I see it more and more intertwined. And I see more and more property practitioners dealing with rentals need to deal with these things. And how do you protect, in the one hand, the tenant and the landlord against the body corporate? Where do you pull the line? So let's quickly go. I'm going to start here at the bottom with a couple of questions answered. We've actually answered quite a couple of them. But here, I'm going to start here at the bottom. Can a body corporate prevent an owner from replacing very old rusted windows with never ones? Okay, so Claire, I'm not going to answer that question. Sorry, guys. I haven't pre-read everything, so if I read and I stop in the middle, Claire, that's a very good question. I think one should actually address that on a sectional title type of webinar, not something that does with rentals. Let's quickly look at Nolan's question. SAPs are very reluctant to intervene in a dispute between landlords and tenants, or body corporates and owners, as they feel that this is a civil matter between the parties themselves. What is the way forward? Nolan, I think the police, if they can, they don't want to get involved. With all love and respect. But listen, we have seen matters where this was brought to my attention again. I speak a lot to Sean, but there was actually a human trafficking in a complex in Cape Town. And when one lady actually escaped, and the police got involved. So I think where they always assess, because unfortunately a lot of landlords and body corporates does misuse the police for their civil matters. But if there's a physical altercation, accidents, those type of things where the police are really a criminal matter, just keep it clean. Don't bring in, you have to pay your levies as well. That should be kept out. Keep it clean and keep it to the criminal matter. Ansel, anything you want to add?
Yeah. If I can just add, your element for police intervention is 95% of the cases immediate threat, immediate danger, immediate harm. So if you are dealing with a tenant that has his, 3 bottles of wine on a Friday evening and starting to walk around the complex shouting, derogatory terms and stuff like that, which obviously I've also dealt with, that's not a police intervention. That calls for a civil case because there's no immediate. Yes, it's highly irritating and frustrating, and we want to sort the guy out. But at the end of the day, that calls for an interdict. If that same guy is walking around, giving a club here and giving a club there and throwing rocks at windows and damaging property, that can cause for immediate threat, immediate harm, immediate danger. Police must get involved. So I think also, yes, I do take your point that they may be reluctant to act. However, a lot that I've seen is it goes into the wording of whenever you pick up that phone to say I'm in danger or there's someone going to be harmed, that makes it that sets the grounds for a criminal prosecution or a criminal complaint. But if you just say, okay, well, this guy is screaming stuff at us, yeah, that's not something that the police is going to get involved with. And again, they love to see to say, okay, well, is there anything else that you could have done? And if you could have done anything else, as opposed to actually calling the police are not going to intervene.
That's actually well said. And I do think, like I say, there's a lot of noise that comes through. Natasha's asking, I have a tenant who's not paying electricity managed by a border corporate that we recover monthly. They do not want to disconnect, even requested by the owner. So Natasha, Ansett said, technically you can't just go and you cannot disconnect the power. Please place the tenant on terms and follow the correct process. Ansett?
Place the tenant on terms. If they do not pay, because obviously it's the landlord will need to pay place the tenant on terms. Landlord will need to cancel. If need be, landlord can approach us and we will bring a disconnection order. But they can't just the body corporates aren't going to do this, because the body corporates know that we're going to be brought a spoliation application and we're going to have to pay for that. So obviously your body corporate I'm 100% with the body corporate. It's a big risk for them to just disconnect. The landlord can contact us. We bring a disconnection application, meaning we go to the court and we ask the court, please, can we disconnect? You're not allowed to disconnect water, electricity, or do anything of that infringes on a constitutional right without the court order. Once we have the court order, then we can tell the body corporate and the municipality, okay, cut off. But without that 100% in agreement with the body corporate, I wouldn't get involved in something like that, knowing that there's a spoliation application waiting for me.
And then I'm going to do our last question is, body corporate rules that haven't been approved by CSOS, are they enforceable?
No. So this is, again, I think this is something that I think we need to put on a sexual titles webinar as well, Elise, so that we can also address Claire's very, very good question. We need to actually, and I'd love to get Jolene involved on stuff like this. If it's not approved, not enforceable. It must be approved. Yes.
So I'm doing this, and I think what we're definitely going to do, I'm going to speak to Ansett and Jolene. I think what we're going to do is we're going to have a follow-up session next month on the 16th of July. I'll speak to them, their availability, and we can really deal, because what I've realized is we thought we're just touching on it slowly. I didn't think there's such a big, there's so many things happening, and we really just touch on it slightly. So for people that I don't touch on their questions, please don't think I don't like you. I don't want to answer your questions. I do think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of these questions. I'm going to set up, I'll send an invite that we can then discuss it again in July. And then we can have those type of questions as well. Like I say, there's certain things that you do need that extra detail into. So, Ansett, you've been absolutely amazing. And your information has been so great. But if you have one tip that you want to share with us today, what would it be?
Elise, I sit with a lot of clients. All right, I sit with many clients that's really being prejudiced beyond belief. I sit with clients, especially when it comes to evictions, when it comes to levies not being paid. I fully understand it, and I'm a very stickler for the rules. I'm a big stickler. You need to do the right thing at the end of the day. I understand frustration. I understand complete utter disappointment. And I hate it when people come and say, oh, well, the judicial system, and that's just the law for you. And the law only protects these people. It's not the case, guys. I'm a lot of things, but I'm not gonna help the criminals. I'm not gonna help the bad guys. Okay, I'm there for the good guys. And in the end of the day, don't get, I don't know, there's a company eviction or Josie Evictions or something. Or the Red Ants or whoever. Just follow the rules, because the most problematic cases that I've ever dealt with are the guys that try to take the law into their own hands, be it now cut electricity or forceful removal or this thing that you take someone else's door down. I I have a very short temper, and in my heart, I'm gonna tell you, yes, I hope you did the right. Oh, I want to believe that you did the right thing, but you didn't do the right thing. There's a law for a reason, and as much as you can be frustrated by the time or the process, which I get, I promise you, doing the right thing will at the end always pay off. So give the rules to the tenants, place them on terms, don't take the law into your own hands. There's a reason there's lawyers involved, there's a reason there's court process. And I've seen many long tears being cried because law was taken into own hands, and then I come on board and I need to try and rectify it. And the cost involved with stuff like that is it's actually much bigger than you would have just paid and gone through the eviction process or, you know, a debt collection process. So do the right thing. I promise you, at the end, it may take time and it may take, it can be a costly process. But at the end, I've seen it time and time and time again. It always turns into the favor of the good guy. I'm a firm believer that the good things will attract to the good guy, and the law will protect you. It may take a while and may take some time, but we will get there where it will be a favorable outcome to the good guy at the end. So just do the right thing and be the good guy.
I love it. Never do something that prejudices your case or your client's case for the landlord. Now, on a lighter note, and I'm not going to say goodbye to you yet because we need to share your details. But on a lighter note, next month is July. If you didn't know, if you like me, you weren't sure what day of the week it was for a moment. On the 18th of July, it's Mandela Day. And here at Expello, we and our team usually look forward to this day as a team building and giving back and having some fun. So we decided this year we are very active people, and to be very adventurous, we are going to play bingo. Now, guys, bingo is very, very exciting, and it's lots of fun. So what we're actually going to do, there's the link, there's a QR code. The people that's in Gauteng, it's going to be at the Expello office. We have a bit of limited space, but we want to jam pack it. So you're going to buy a 50 Rand ticket. We have two charities that this money is going to go through. One charity that is helping elderly people and children and people struggling, and then of course an animal sanctuary, Kitty Cash. So how it's going to work is you're going to buy your 50 Rand ticket to come and join us on the day. We're going to play on the hour. There's going to be a bingo game. On your 50 Rand ticket, you can get coffee and tea and a pannekoek. People keep on telling me it's a pancake. A pancake is not a pannekoek, okay? So we are getting actually a different charity that's going to be on the premises. They're going to sell us pannekoek, the proper pannekoek. So in your 50 Rand ticket, you'll get a pannekoek, and then you get your bingo card. Now, in each session, we have a sponsor. We are having, Ansayete just confirmed this morning, VDM will sponsor our first session, 500 Rand. We're going to have a suitcase with the cash inside, like real gangster. So you can win this money on the session. So the ticket money is going absolutely to the charities. And then on the day, if you come, the Kitty Cats, we are going to list the things that you're going to bring. If you want to bring some food or anything, they're going to be here. You're going to sponsor those things, but we'll share all the information as soon as you register. So if you haven't planned anything, we don't want the full day. We actually just want not even 67 minutes. If you just can spare 40 minutes out of your day, come join us, come meet the team. Everybody here in Expello would love to actually meet all of our clients. So the people that's in Gauteng, please come and join us. I also want to give away 2 tickets today to someone. And actually, Lindy now just said thank you. And the reason why I'm actually picking Lindy van der Westhuizen is because she confirmed in the chats that Elise, I get my tenant to sign the body corporate rules at the end of every page when they sign the lease. And that warmed my heart. Lindy, that is what we want to hear. So I'm going to give to you 2 tickets for the day, but please register the link just as well. And we can make sure that you guys can join us for the Pannakoek bingo and coffee. It's going to be lots of fun. And of course, if you know, like me and Armand, and we want to gamble a bit more, you can buy extra bingo cards to make your chances of winning a bit extra. So please don't. We'll drop that link in the chat as well, and we'll see when we do the mailer to everyone. We will send it out. So just to end off, I said to Unsaid, you won't believe how quickly an hour goes, and I'm very religious about this hour because we know everybody is busy. Please, yes, Unsaid's office number. There's their website. Contact them. Not everybody knows about sectional titles. It's a very specialized field. This firm can help you. So please use them, contact them for all the help. Answer it from me and everybody. Thank you for your time this morning. Thank you for always being available and willing to assist, and always your service. Your service has always been a great. Then for everybody else, Lizana's dropped in the chat. Expeller started an Expeller chat group because people saying, oh, we're missing things on email and everything to that effect. We are not going to greet you every morning, and we're not going to say good night every evening. This chat group is really to drop off tips every week and to tell of events because people do miss it. So if you want to join, if we didn't join you as yet, please follow the link, join us on the group and stay connected. And again, Ansel, thank you. And to everybody online, stay warm, and we look forward to be of service. Thank you.
Thank you, Elise. Thank you, everyone.